Today we're going to talk about the events of last week, both in and surrounding Charlottesville, Virginia. The media, both old and new, have already spent a great deal of time on this, so I wanted to bring up a few things that have been bugging me, and that I haven't heard very many people speak about yet. As with any big media storm, there has been a lot of nonsense flying back and forth between sides, and very few people critically approaching the situation or seeking to provide concrete answers with the information they've been presented. Just the same old, either Trump bad or fake news narratives that, while sensationalist and satisfying to the demographics that appreciate them, ultimately do very little to inform people of the information they should be taking away from the events such as these. And yes, I am saying that a lot of the alternative media has become nothing more than opposition to the mainstream media, spinning the same narratives in the opposite direction. They tend to more closely reflect reality, but ultimately every piece of information is just a chess piece to be advanced in the pursuit of some goal. Now, that said, I won't go into this pretending as though I don't have any biases. I for one would like to see two things happen. I'd like to see the extremist communist group known as Antifa be brought to the center stage in the realm of mainstream political discourse. They've been going under the radar for far too long, and at this point, I'm just tired of it and them. They are as much of a cancer as the people who they despise. Which brings us to number 2. I want all radical identitarian groups to go away. I don't care if it's white identity, or black identity, or genderqueer, or Latinx, or whatever. Go away. In the interest of achieving these goals, I figure that the best way for us to spend our time here is to critique the words and actions of Donald Trump, so that we can all look at and recognize the errors made by him and learn something from them. We'll be going through Trump's cluster of statements regarding the violence that erupted at the protest in Charlottesville, and the media's response.
But we're closely following the terrible events unfolding in Charlottesville, Virginia. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides. It's been going on for a long time in our country. Not Donald Trump, not Barack Obama. This has been going on for a long, long time. It has no place in America. What is vital now is a swift restoration of law and order and the protection of innocent lives. No citizen should ever fear for their safety and security in our society, and no child should ever be afraid to go outside and play or be with their parents and have a good time.
Quite frankly, I agree with the criticisms Trump received for this statement, but not for the same reasons that people use to criticize him. Trump, in this first statement, absolutely should have directly named the groups affiliated with the alt-right who caused trouble that day, as well as naming Antifa at a minimum, instead of just giving what essentially is a milquetoast response to the situation as a whole. This made him look weak, and it was something that the media capitalized on, because when you aren't as explicit as possible with the media, they can and will take what you say and spin it into the narrative they want. Leave no openings. This was Trump's first mistake, but not the only one. In his second statement,
to anyone who acted criminally in this weekend's racist violence, you will be held fully accountable. Justice will be delivered. As I said on Saturday, we condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. And as I have said many times before, no matter the color of our skin, we all live under the same laws. We all salute the same great flag. And we are all made by the same Almighty God. We must love each other, show affection for each other, and unite together in condemnation of hatred, bigotry, and violence. We must rediscover the bonds of love and loyalty that bring us together as Americans. Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans. We are a nation founded on the truth that all of us are created equal. We are equal in the eyes of our Creator. we are equal under the law, and we are equal under our Constitution.
Trump is just about spot on with the message he is trying to convey. Just like I said a moment ago, a statement that is as specific as possible is what he needed to give the first time around. And that's exactly what he's done by naming several groups that were both at the Unite the Right rally and are directly relevant to what he's talking about. Needless to say, this deal of specificity didn't stop the media from trying to spin his statements into something they weren't. But when you have Trump directly naming and condemning the groups he mentioned, it makes them look like the liars they are when they try to say that he didn't condemn them, or that he was being soft toward the KKK or white supremacist groups. This is the situation you always want the media to put themselves in. You want for the things they say to not match easily verifiable reality. And this is the exact situation they weaseled their way into, just by not being able to report on anything accurately thanks to their own biases. We still have the problem that Trump has not named Antifa or any other radical left group that was present at the Unite the Right rally, which, again, should have happened in his first statement. But this leads us to the statements Trump made in his press conference.
Senator McCain, you mean the one who voted against Obamacare?
And he said
Who is Senator? You mean Senator McCain who voted against us getting good health care?
McCain said that the alt-right is behind these attacks, and he linked that same group to those who perpetrated the attack in Charlottesville.
Well, I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm sure Senator McCain must know what he's talking about. But when you say the alt-right, define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying,
define it for me. Come on, let's go. Define
Senator
it for me.
McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging him? Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
This is Senator McCain's statement.
Let me ask you this. What about the fact they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute. I'm not finished. Fake news. That was a horrible day. I will tell you something. I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you have, you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent.
What Trump did here by stopping her from using the alt-right as a broad term was correct. There are many different schools of thought in the alt-right, and while I believe most of you know that only a few of them actually are white supremacist, it's also true that not all of them have ethno-nationalist views either. Most, but not all. Now, I'm not sure if this is specifically what Trump's issue was. However, I do know that he was just generally responding to her lack of specificity when it came to talking about a specific group responsible for what happened in Charlottesville. As Trump explained previously, there were a multitude of other groups protesting the removal of the Robert E. Lee statue. Some of these groups were conservative, some centrist, and believe it or not, some liberal. As with any issue, there are a multitude of positions for any one person to take, and an even wider range of reasons for why one might take a given position. So Trump was absolutely correct to not only call out the usage of alt-right in this context, but also to ask the reporter to specify who exactly they meant by alt-right. However, Trump made a fatal error by recognizing this, calling this out, and then doing it himself by asking her about the alt-left. Many people, myself included, will give Trump praise here for indirectly referring to Antifa and the violence that they incited at this event. But Trump not having explicitly named them as a party responsible was one of the most foolish things he could have done in this situation. For starters, no one calls themselves alt-left. And before Trump said it, no one even referred to Antifa as the alt-left. This puts the viewer, the normie, in a bad place, because while they may be one of the people who trust neither Trump nor the media, when they go to look up the alt-left, what are they going to find? At the time, a search would have turned up an article like this from Vanity Fair titled, "Why the Alt-Left is a Problem Too." Much of the media spotlight has been on the alt-right, but the alt-left provides a mirror image distortion, the same loathing of Clinton, rejection of identity politics, and itch for a reckoning. I don't really need to read any more of this article because I'm pretty sure that from just this one statement, you can tell that this directly refers to people like myself. And this is a problem. Then you have a different article from a website named American Greatness titled, "What is the Alt-Left?" The alt-left largely dismisses the old liberal idea of 1960 civil rights. Liberals once promoted integration, and the goal of an American melting pot empowered by the time-honored traditions of racially blind integration, assimilation, and intermarriage. The liberal goal was once a common American culture and experience, where race became subsidiary. Yet, we hear little from liberals anymore about non-discrimination and integration. Instead, preference, diversity, and segregated safe spaces become the new discriminatory and reparatory agendas. The alt-left also believes that racial, ethnic, sexual, and religious identity is essential, not incidental to character. I'm sure you can recognize this as a reference to the kinds of people we've come to affectionately recognize as social justice warriors. And while their associations may run deep, and they may overlap here and there, what this is definitely not referring to is Antifa. So, as much as I appreciate Trump for wanting to and trying to set a spotlight on Antifa and their violence, the very spotlight that the media itself should have an ethical responsibility to provide of their own accord, all Trump really wound up doing was obfuscating this issue even more than it already was for anyone who was a normie. And of course, this lack of specificity allows the media to make him look like a fool for the normies who are unaware of what the alt-left referred to in this context, and are also uninterested in doing their own research. This, of course, is the primary demographic of people who consume the mainstream media. Next, let's look at how Trump's adversaries at CNN have chosen to frame Antifa in their messaging the day before Trump made this statement, and you'll see exactly what the main issue here was. What is Antifa? Antifa is short for anti-fascist. The term is used to define a broad group of people whose political beliefs lean toward the left, often the far left, but do not conform with the Democratic Party platform. The group doesn't have an official leader or headquarters, although groups in certain states hold regular meetings. And here we have an example of a lie by omission. Exactly how far left is far left in this paragraph? Is it far enough left that they are no longer liberals? Isn't that a detail you should be including? Because when you say their beliefs lean toward the left but don't conform with the Democratic Party platform, that's so ambiguous that it could mean anyone on the left who isn't a corporatist. Could it be that Antifa's political beliefs don't conform with the Democratic Party platform because they don't see the state as being legitimate? Could it be that they have some kind of illusions of overthrowing the state and eliminating the rich? Let's find out. Antifa's positions can be hard to define, but many members support oppressed populations and protest the amassing of wealth by corporations and elites. Some employ radical or militant tactics to get their message across. And this is the point where any rational person would have realized that what they thought was hard to define was just described as communism. You have a bunch of militant radicals opposed to the amassing of wealth and supporting oppressed populations. The only thing missing here is a spiel about the means of production. But I can guarantee you that when they say oppressed populations, they're talking about the proletariat, not minority groups. And I know this because they've already defined wealth as the adversary in the same sentence. But nothing is more of an indictment than what they say themselves. Scott Crow, a former Antifa organizer, says the radical ideas promoted by Antifas are starting to be adopted by liberals. They would never have looked at those ideals before because they saw us as the enemy as much as the right-wingers. And that's all you need right there. This is recognition that in this person's mind, liberals and the kinds of people in Antifa belong in two groups distinct from each other, and that either the ideology or tactics are starting to be adopted by liberals. I'm not sure which one because the wording here is ambiguous. Now, I didn't bring us here just to complain about CNN's disingenuous article. I want to show you guys the exact reason that Trump should have named Antifa directly in his press conference. Like I said a moment ago, this article was published on August 14th, the day before Trump spoke the third time. And despite softballing what Antifa believes, CNN did manage to give an accurate representation of what exactly Antifa does. In the section with the heading, "Why are they so controversial?" The group is known for causing damage to property during protests. In Berkeley, black-clad protesters wearing masks threw Molotov cocktails and smashed windows at the Student Union Center where Milo Yiannopoulos' speaking event was to be held. Crow, who was involved with Antifa for almost 30 years, said members use violence as a means of self-defense, and they believe property destruction does not equate to violence. In what sane person's mind does causing any amount of property damage not equate to violence? How could any person justify this kind of doublethink in their own minds? The very act of saying causing damage and violence in the same sentence is a tautology in and of itself. And this becomes immediately apparent when the two interviewees go on and try to justify this. There is a place for violence. Is that the world we want to live in? No. Is that the world we want to inhabit? No. Is that the world we want to create? No. But will we push back? Yes. Push back against what? What has a building done to you personally? What did this trash can do to you? These people are either liars or completely disconnected from reality. Brian Levin, director of the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University, San Bernardino, and a man who generally seems to have his head screwed on in the right direction, says Antifa activists feel the need to partake in violence because they believe that elites are controlling the government and the media. So they need to make a statement, head on against the people who they regard as racist. How is this any different from the Jewish conspiracy that many people on the alt-right believe in? Honest question. What they're trying to do now is not only become prominent through violence at these high-profile rallies, but also to reach out through small meetings and through social networking to cultivate disenfranchised progressives who heretofore were peaceful. I don't really mean to praise CNN here, but for once, in this one article, they're not being fake news, or at least they're not being as fake as they normally are. This article is an indictment of Antifa as an extremist group to any sensible, rationally minded person. And ultimately, my problem with Trump's statements is that he let an opportune moment slip away by not just saying Antifa's name. With this article, he could have quoted it at the podium, using CNN as a source, maybe even praising them for a job well done. And while they were taken aback by that, they would be in a situation where they themselves have proved Trump's point and can't backpedal away from it. This would have been the absolute correct course of action. And quite frankly, it isn't too late for Trump to make a fourth and final statement where he does exactly what I've described. But instead, Trump did not name Antifa. And in the wake of that press conference, you had the media generally acting as though Trump's words were completely out of the left field, and as though they had absolutely no idea who Trump could possibly be referring to by saying the alt-left. You all should know by now, I'm going to criticize where criticism is due because that's just who I am. I have no interest in being a yes man for Trump or Armored Skeptic or Sargon or anyone else. So when I see that someone has made a tactical error, I'm going to point it out if no one else does. If you're someone who fancies themselves as a fan of Trump, which to be fair I doubt my audience necessarily is full of, I will encourage you to criticize the man where criticism is due. Don't act like the man can do no wrong, because even relatively small mistakes like these are situations that can be learned from. And think about what the situation right now would be if Trump had just named Antifa. With all the information I've given you, how differently could things have turned out if he quoted CNN? What position would the mainstream media be in at this very moment? I'm not really much of one to ask for things, but if you find my videos informative, and you might want to support my channel going into the future, please consider pledging $1 over on Patreon. There's a link in the description. If that isn't your thing, then don't worry about it. Just remember to share my videos with people on all sides of an issue. Thank you.